Welcome to Grateful Connections, What Gratitude Built, the podcast where women in business share the lessons, strategies, and gratitude behind their growth. Here's your host, Malinda, leading inspiring conversations that fuel your growth, spark gratitude, and remind you that you're not building your business alone.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, as I am super excited to talk to Eloiza Domingo, who I've been so honored and so excited to have met through my journey of connecting with amazing women. And Eloiza is just this powerful presenter, public speaker, and a woman with an incredible background, and really follows one of my personal passions, which is truly being inclusive and diverse. There's nothing I want more than in my community for Grateful Connections to not be a community of just women who look the same. So diversity and inclusion is just an important passion of mine. And so I'm super honored to have connected with Eloiza, who's an expert in this field, and in her background will be able to share with you what that looks like. So Eloiza, one of the things I just have loved hearing about your story is the ability that you've had to climb the corporate ladder and to become an executive in the DEI area. And can you tell us about your background? And I really am very curious about your elevation to that role.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. So first of all, Malinda, thank you so much for having me. For those people listening, it's been a huge pleasure of mine, actually, to get to know you and to know your background. You have you have amazing energy, so to be able to just kind of like feed off of that is great.
Thank you.
So Malinda, I've been in the field of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's a lot of acronyms, by the way. People say belonging, people say engagement, but in general, let's just talk about DEI for probably over 25 years. And I started that work. I am the daughter of immigrants from the Philippines. And so people say often like, well, like you said, how do you get into this work? Honestly, I was really born into this work. My dad is a doctor. He's a radiation oncologist, oncologic surgeon. My mom was a forensic scientist. And, it was one of those things where I watched my dad handling patients with he had a very strong accent. What people believed was a strong accent. I didn't believe that.
Sure.
So when you have a mask on, hard to read lips. And so what would happen is some of his patients would be taken away from him, or, he was just stereotyped. And I remember thinking when I was young, like, that's really unfair. Like, that's really interesting that's happening. Right. And so I remember growing up and thinking everybody needs kind of a fair chance. I just have kind of the DNA for it. And then as I got into my work at Indiana University, I helped open the Asian Culture Center there. And I remember it was one of those moments where like I had a bunch of people basically walk. It was like 200, 300 people, kind of like drop your pencils at 2:00 and like walk to the president's office, to advocate or to kind of be a group of activists and ask for the Asian Culture Center. And I remember it was then that leaders said to me, you have such an opportunity to actually do this from the inside, not the outside, and learn how to really do this as a leader within an organization to push DEI to, kind of systemic heights. So my master's is in higher education and student affairs with a background in counseling, psychology, and diversity and law. And then I did a lot of this work in higher education institutions like the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Bucknell University. And then I went to Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center, the #1 pediatric center in the nation, if not the world. And I helped open the international patient wing there, which specialized in hematology and oncology patients from the Arab Gulf. These were the sickest kids coming from the Arab Gulf. It actually raised our acuity level as a hospital to the top pediatric, most acute hospital in the country at the time. And, Malinda, it's really hard. I'm a mom, you're a mom, to see kids that are sick.
Can't even imagine.
Yeah. And with cancer, it's really hard. And to see their families come here for months at a time and leave their entire life to come here. And then, so I was responsible for making sure that the patients got the best, what we call world-class care. But at the same time, that we were also understanding how to work with patients who were from the Arab Gulf, who were Muslim, who spoke Arabic, when Cincinnati at the time did not have a very large Arab culture. So you talk about diversity, you talk about bringing 200, by the way, it was 200 patients. All of a sudden, there were the sickest kids in the nation to a city that did not have that. So for example, if the kids became septic and they would call 911 in Cincinnati, there were no interpreters that could help that kid speak or that parent speak in Arabic, and you've got a septic kid, that's a fatal
It's danger.
situation.
Yeah, very
Danger.
dangerous.
So those are some of the things that I helped with. And then Johns Hopkins Medicine had me go over. I was the deputy chief diversity officer there. I helped open the Center for Transgender Health, which is one of the largest gender affirming care centers on the East Coast now and in the world. We won an innovation award for it. So I'm very, very proud of that work.
Wow.
Diversity and engagement at Astellas Pharmaceuticals. So for those of us here that are in this area, we know that Astellas is right over here on the corridor. And then I walked right across the street at the time to Allstate, and I was global chief diversity officer there. I have since left Allstate and now have my own company called Eloiza Consulting. So, and I don't even know, Malinda, if you even know this, but when I opened my company in June of 2024, I didn't know really what to name it.
Yeah.
And I wanted to name it about myself, around authenticity, about, something about me, something fun. So I named it 410, which 410 is my height.
Oh my, I love that. I love that.
One of the things, about me is I realized that people would say often, like when I would do keynotes, I'd walk onto the stage and they'd be like, oh my gosh, she's so little, or, oh my gosh, why are you so tiny? And I think people assumed certain things about me being a woman that was little.
Yes.
The average height of women in America is 5'2" to 5'3". I'm like several inches below that.
Right.
And so there were a lot of assumptions that were made about me. And then all of a sudden I would open my mouth, or
they would see like this dynamic speaker with this power behind this little short woman. Exactly. I love that. I love that.
And so that's why the name came about. That name still exists, but then I built Eloiza Consulting, out of it. And here we are today.
I love that. Oh my gosh, even just hearing your story about your dad, right? And kind of how that stems from just wanting to make a difference, where we don't need to have in stereotypes. Everyone deserves such an equal chance. And it's literally at my core, one of my biggest passions, where, until someone proves to me that the stereotype exists, I don't want to believe it. Like, I want to get to know the person and their values and then make an assumption about that person. And so absolutely. I just really love that you found that passion early on and could make a career out of it and become so successful. And with all of those impacts and those changes and everything that you were doing, what kind of struggles did you personally run into? First of all, as a woman, second of all, as a woman of color, what were some of those like blatant in your face obstacles that you had run into? And then again, like, how did you overcome them? And how did you persevere through all of that?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that conversation, because I think oftentimes people see, and I'll just talk about me. I know that I have a strong personality. People have said that I'm intimidating, that I seem very confident. And so there's an assumption that's made that, oh, you must have just driven through this. Like you
plowed through, like no worries.
You were fine. That's not how it was. I definitely was told that I was too much. I didn't really know my place. I didn't really understand how to share my opinions, because I have always had opinions going into meetings and being able to raise my hand and say what I had to say. There were definitely moments, and especially in my career, when it was like, Eloiza, I would really recommend know your place, but I would notice that people wouldn't say that to young males, who were there. Yeah. And young males were speaking up and giving their opinion and these kinds of things. And so I just watched that. I was also raised around, again, two physicians that taught me to speak up. You had to speak up in medicine, otherwise you're kind of left behind. So I learned that. And it was encouraged for me to speak up. And then all of a sudden it was like, you need to know your place. And I was like,
and who would say that to you? Would it be like your direct leaders or just people
it's what's really interesting about this, Malinda, and this is why I think we need to talk about this, especially in the platform that you have provided for us as female leaders. It was actually other women. Interestingly, in my career, I have been very, very lucky to have men say to me, hey, you did amazing in that meeting. Let me give you a couple, like, this is what I would recommend. And it wasn't, to me, it really wasn't mansplaining. It was like, you did amazing. Next time when you say that, cite what you're saying. Like, when you said what you said, that was a really good, but what would actually build it is to say, Forbes in 2007 said this. It actually, it would build your credibility. Or, hey, remember that when you go in, I remember I had this male leader, who said to me, you're short. And I was like, what the hell? And he goes, so
very direct.
I know. And I was like, what in the world is going on? He goes, so when you go into meetings, he goes, sit closer to the person that's running the meeting. He goes, when you're speaking, don't be nervous about standing up. Like if you want to stand
Mhm.
up, and say, I had this one leader who said to me, he was a male leader who said, hey, you did really well, in that meeting. One thing that I would encourage you to do is he taught me to like basically cite, what I was saying
Okay.
is he was like, you have a really good grasp on stats, for example. And I would say, well, in this publication, this and this, he goes, if you say something like McKinsey's said, da, 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 da. And this is when I was also in academic medicine. And so learning that had a lot of power
Yeah.
was important to me. And again, I had a male leader say that to me. I also had another male leader come up and say, hey, you did really well in that meeting. I've watched you in meetings before. You're really short. And I was like, what? I was like, where are we going with this? And
Right.
he said, here's what I would recommend. He goes, next time when you're in a meeting, sit by the person who's facilitating the meeting, like sit closer to that person. He goes, because people are constantly looking at that person. And if when you speak, you're closer A, to that person, and B, he goes, don't be nervous, Eloiza. If you have to stand up in a meeting, stand up and just say, hey, I just have a point. I'm just going to kind of stand up. He goes, own your spot. And I was like, thank
Wow.
you. Like that for male leaders to say that to me,
It's
I
huge.
actually learned a lot about owning my space, unapologetically, like taking up space, unapologetically saying what I had to say, but saying it in certain ways and in certain spaces. I've actually, unfortunately, Malinda, to your point, the people who have said, hey, you might want to think about pulling your hair back, instead of wearing it down, or, hey, those earrings, we don't really wear those earrings, here, were women. And it wasn't in an
Whoa.
educative way.
No. In a
It was,
competitive, like they just
it
did
was
not
competitive.
see, they saw
Yeah.
you as
Yeah.
competition.
Yeah.
And that's what's so fascinating to me is, I think I mentioned to you, I'm reading the book Women Rising. And there's a whole,
Yes.
the whole part of the book I'm in right now is a conversation about these exact situations where the paradoxes of be strong and independent, speak up for
100%.
yourself, but also like watch how you're doing that, right? Like
Yeah.
do it, but don't do it this way or don't be yourself. And so I know one of the conversations we're going to get to here in a few minutes is talking about being authentic as to who
Yeah.
you are and
Yeah.
not trying to hold back just because someone else is telling you to behave that way.
Right. That's right.
You know what? I can have a similar situation where I've had the worst bosses in the world and the best bosses, right? The worst one was a woman that I worked for a very long time and was extremely condescending. It was always like, well, why didn't you say it this way? Or if I would have handled it, I would have done it this. I can't believe you did, whatever, right? It was very condescending in the approach. And then I had the best boss I ever had. And he was this amazing man who literally said to me, Malinda, I had to do this presentation and it was god awful. I think it was the worst presentation probably ever given. And he was like, Malinda, what was that? He's like, you are a very smart, very confident, like a well-educated woman. And the way you did that presentation, you were so insecure. You didn't, because I'd never had to do them before. So I had way too many bullet points. I was reading everything. I was looking for other people for validation and it completely sucked. But I'm so insanely grateful for him because he did come to me with that coaching approach. Like, hey, Malinda, you could have done better because you're this way and because you're so smart, right? And ironically, it was a man. So it's very interesting how sometimes the men can be very much like put you in your place because they also see you as competition and they want to keep their roles, and their expertise at their own level. But when it's another woman, that's just wild. So when you've had these amazing, it sounds like between the university, the hospital setting and the corporate setting, you've made some big impacts. So many things that you're probably extremely proud of. Maybe what are the top 2 or 3, that you can walk away from saying like, through some of these challenges, I've made the biggest impacts. Like, what are some of the things you're most proud of?
Yeah, so that's such a good question, first of all. And I'm going to start with something big, but also, even though I'm going to start with this, I'm going to give another example that I think is even bigger. So the Center for Transgender Health, as I mentioned, at Johns Hopkins Medicine, which is now the largest center for gender affirming care on the East Coast and one of the largest in the world. At the time that we were in Baltimore, I was in Baltimore, the number one population that was being targeted in the city of Baltimore for murder, gun violence particularly, were Black transgender females. And they were coming to our EDs, our emergency departments, to get fixed, right? So we would fix them up, we would save their lives, and we would send them back out. But the thing is that what I noticed was that we weren't able to care for them other than just the trauma of them getting shot or attempted
Oh
murder or
my
something like that.
gosh.
And so here we were, what Johns Hopkins Medicine is considered an anchor institution. An anchor institution is a company or an organization within a city that basically employs a whole bunch of people, and again is seen like as an anchor in that
Okay.
city. Johns Hopkins Medicine was that for Baltimore. And so here we were also helping the people that were targeted for murder, but we were saving their lives, but that was it. Like, how are we not making their lives better?
Right.
Helping them with OB-GYN care or speech pathology or, endocrinology care or anything like that. And so I started tugging on heartstrings, thinking, oh, I was raised by doctors. Doctors care about
Right.
people and I can just tug on. So I made the business case about, well, we can do more with these lives and all this other stuff. And I was really surprised, Malinda, because they were like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, listen, we've got other things we got to do there. We've got other patients, coming in. We don't really see the reason. Like, we save their lives and we send them somewhere else.
Right.
And I thought, that's interesting. And I thought, but this is, for some reason, I was so driven by this. I really
You're not giving up.
Yeah, I did. And what's interesting, Melinda, I knew nothing about transgender care, nothing about transgender medical care, nothing. So I was like, why am I so driven by this? It had to do with justice. It had to do with they weren't getting fair treatment from the number one institution, in the country. And so I started doing some research and I started understanding how much it would cost to get gender affirming care at other institutions. I started asking questions from transgender patients saying, hey, if Hopkins offered this, would you come? The answer was always yes. And so I put together a market business case showing that we could actually have a profit gain if we helped these patients. Hopkins is very competitive. So I said, we've got this massive group of market. It doesn't matter who they are, market, going to UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, going to a place in New York. Why wouldn't we have them come here and our profit would go up? Because many transgender patients pay out of pocket, by the way.
Right. Oh, I'm sure.
Instead of through insurance. And so Hopkins said, all right, fine, Eloiza, fine. Like, figure out the patient flow. You can figure it out, whatever. I'm like, great. So I said, I'll have 9 patients by the end of the first quarter. We had 99 patients by the end of the first quarter.
Oh,
It took place where it's now again the Center for Transgender Health. And that, to me, Malinda, the reason why it's important to me, and that the reason why I see that as a huge accomplishment for me, is because I kind of went it blind. I kind of was like, I have no clue what I'm doing,
right. But you were following your a passion, or like your heart was speaking to you about what needed to change.
And that's exactly what it was. And then once I realized that the business case wasn't working, the tugging on heartstrings wasn't working, I figured out another way. I figured out how to talk their talk, figure out what motivated them, which were finances, reputation, all this other stuff. And I put together a pretty strong business case and then was able to influence endocrinology, OB-GYN, pediatrics, all these other massive organizations to say, yes, fine, I'll give you one doctor, one endocrinologist, one OB-GYN, one speech path. I will give you these people and you can run these patients through. And the awesome thing about it is that prior to this, Johns Hopkins Medicine was actually known for being an anti-transgender institution for 40 years. And so by changing this, not only did we increase profit and increase patient flow, we actually reversed 40 years of anti-trans belief at Johns Hopkins Medicine. So to me, that was a big, big accomplishment.
I love this so much.
Yeah. And that to me is really about what it is that I do is I look at market and figure out, like, there has to be other markets that you're not paying attention to that need your help. And you actually can grow your brand, switch your brand, change your culture, but also make money off of it. That's one example. And really, Malinda, you asked, what are some of the things in my career that I'm really proud of? That's a big one. But some of the other things is exactly what you said earlier, is other women, particularly women of color, that come up to me and say, because of the things that you've done, because of the way that you are, wearing the jewelry that you do, wearing the clothes that you do, being authentic, being comfortable, walking in a room and sitting down and standing up when you have to, being unapologetically yourself, knowing that you're 4'10", knowing that you're the daughter of immigrants, knowing that, I was unapologetically that. I had a lot of young women come up to me and say, you've created a space where, like, I didn't know that I could be that. And thank you. Like, I can wear certain types of clothes and wear this and look the way that I do and still present really strong. I can take up space where other people don't look like me. I can say, no, this is what I think. I can stop time, because you did it. And that, to me, as much as I love the Center for Transgender Health, all the international hair stuff that I've done, to have especially younger women who look like me say, now I know, now I can do it. That probably means more to me than like establishing the brick and mortar
project. Yes.
stuff.
100%. Because that, I mean, it does come down to like, you know, me, my number one passion is just really seeing women succeed. And I was very early as a young kid, I would have said I'm a feminist at, you know, in high school, even though I probably didn't even know what that meant. But really for me, I wanted to be a stockbroker, not because I gave a crap about money, but I was like, I just want to be successful in a man's world. Like that was always my mission. And clearly I gave up on that. And I just, you know, I stayed in sales all this time, but really and truly it speaks to me to see someone take that lead to say, I want to pave the way for other women to be successful. And especially when we are living in a day and age still to this day where it is more difficult for us as women to climb the corporate ladder and to be in those positions. So Eloiza, I love that so much. And I feel like, I mean, hearing your story about the transgender project at Johns Hopkins just means so much too, just because that gives people a way to become their authentic self, right? It's to become themselves and to do it with a way that isn't just so let's fix you and move on. How can we help you become the person that you want to be? So when we're talking about where you're moving now from that amazing background and you're trailblazing forward, I know you want to do some consulting on a couple of different areas. Do you want to expand on the 3 different tracks that you're really setting out to trailblaze for?
Yeah, no, I would love that, Malinda. Thank you for the opportunity. And, you know, I'm going to pull a string because some people say, oh, well, you're doing 3 types of consulting. And how does that all make sense? You know, I have always believed in just, as I mentioned, being yourself, being what you and I have talked about is this authenticity, which to me means that you are reliably yourself, regardless of if you see me and Malinda at dinner later, and you're going to see the same Eloiza from this call versus at like, you know, the boardroom, you know, or you may see, you know, me in one job and another. It's going to be the same, you know, and that's really to me what the thread is. So the 3 places, Malinda, of consulting that I provide is, again, given my background in DEI, I still provide diversity consulting, but also I specialize in crisis leadership. Crisis meaning there's a lot going on in the world. Companies typically don't prepare for crisis. Your organizations may not, you know, when we build our companies, we think it's going to be awesome. You know, everything is going to be beautiful. We're going to have this amazing, you know, plan. We typically don't build crisis or chaos into the plan. It's typically business as usual. So then when crisis happens, and crisis to me, by the way, is defined by anything that takes you away from business as usual. And so if we typically don't plan for that. And so what I do is I work with leaders to understand how to plan for crisis before, during, and after the crisis, because you can actually build your brand and build your culture. I always say, never let a good crisis go to waste, is essentially what
I love that. Yeah.
Definitely DEI. So that's number 1. The second one is I work with students of all ages. So, you know, from students from high school or even littler, you know, than that, all the way to executives. Around building their confidence in their speaking ability. You know, I've been a public speaker, Malinda, since people laugh about this, but honestly, since I was 4.
Oh my gosh.
When I started learning how to be in a hospital setting with my parents who would walk me through, and I would have to shake hands. Hi, my name is Eloiza. I'm 5. This is my dad, Dr. Domingo. And I'm in kindergarten. That to me is public speaking, right?
Absolutely.
Holding your space, being confident, you know just as well as I do, Malinda, oftentimes we will actually give a job to somebody who interviews better versus somebody who is like, who can't like hold an interview, even their resume may be amazing, but if they don't show up well, that actually, it breaks your assumption a little bit. So what I want to make sure to do is everybody needs to know what their voice is and have what I call my T, E for my last name, for my first name, Eloiza, IT voice. Use your voice and let me help you do that. Whether it's an interview, whether it's telling your company some bad news, sensitive information. This is also what, you know, I help with. And then really, you know, the last thing is really around keynote speaking, public speaking, anything. You know, I do a lot with employee resource groups. I do a lot with imposter syndrome.
That's huge.
Women in leadership, of course, what I call high asset women. And so those are kind of the 3 spaces where I can help build authenticity and pull that and really grow it actually in different ways.
I love that so much. As you know, I think as a small business owner myself, really wanting to, and I'm still struggling on being a public speaker, so I'm sure that I could take some tips from you for sure. But also just like giving women that confidence is literally at the core of why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because
Yeah.
I think there's so many women who want to do things, but they're terrified, the imposter
Yeah.
syndrome. And there
Yeah.
is nothing more valuable, in my opinion, obviously with yours as well, is the only way to do that is to be authentic and to
Yeah,
be
it is.
exactly who you are. And you're going to connect with and draw in people that are most aligned with you when you are authentic. And
Yep.
there is nothing that makes me happier or makes my heart happier or prouder than when someone has said to me through whether it's my social media marketing or the way that I speak or whatever, people, when they tell me that they feel my authenticity and my
Yeah.
genuine nature, I don't think there's a better compliment because
Yeah, I
to
agree.
me, I just want people to know and feel that they can be comfortable around me because I am me. More people, especially women, I think, don't have the confidence where they're trying so hard to fit into a box or fit in somewhere else. And then through your rise into your executive career, the only way to do that is to be strong and confident in
Yeah.
yourself. So I
Yeah.
think there
Yeah.
is an amazing education that you can provide for women
Yeah.
for that. And I'm really excited about having you speak here at the Grateful Connections event at
Yep.
the end of the month, where
Yep.
we're going to talk about how to include diversity in your business plan
Yep.
without it being intimidating and scary. Like,
Right.
how can we
That's
do
right.
this well? And again, I'm extremely honored and privileged to have you do that because it is a topic that's
Absolutely.
really important to me.
Yeah.
I guess maybe if you could give a couple of tips
Yeah.
prior to our conversation, what are some things that small business owners can really look for and plan for and think about when they're trying to be inclusive and diverse in their business with their own
Absolutely.
clients?
So yeah, no, absolutely. So one of the things that I encourage, especially small businesses, to think about is really what is your value? Like what values do you actually want to bring forward? So Melinda, for you, for example, you have been very clear with your clients,
Mhm.
with your audience, that diversity is a value of yours. For anybody who wants to think about that, what does that actually mean? So for example, if you say, yeah, diversity and inclusion is a real value of mine. And like keep going. You have to
Right.
define, meaning I'm going to make something up. I want to make sure that my audience or my clients see themselves in my staff. So I might be very deliberate in making
Yes.
sure that I have people of all different skin tones. I have people who identify within the LGBTQ spectrum. I have people who are, whatever. So that when you walk into my space, it is, I see myself. So that might be that.
That's
You
huge.
might say, I value language diversity. So you might have people who speak Spanish, or speak Arabic, or have just a wide variety. So that's the number one thing. I always encourage companies, you need to define that for yourself. You don't come in and say, I value everything about diversity, because here's what that is. You can, as a person, as a company, you can't. It is very,
Mm,
very, very difficult. And I'm not trying to be unromantic. I'm being very real with you.
I love
And the
that.
reason why is because you have to define, again, if I sell clothes, and it is okay to say that, my primary priority around diversity is around, I don't know, race diversity. Okay, great. So let's think about how that shows up in your business. And it's
Mm,
not that you devalue the other parts of diversity, language, gender identity, LGBTQ, all this other stuff. It means that for your business, does it make sense? Diversity is a value, but how does diversity fit into your business? So that's number one and number two. And then the number three thing is, then again, how does it show up? So if you value LGBTQ, it's very easy to do things like have an LGBTQ flag in
mhm.
your store, or have, like, even like as you're signing, things, to have like a sticker. The littlest things, do
I love
matter. It
that.
really does start with defining what that means for you, figuring out how you pull that through. And then I would also say, and we're going to talk about this, Melinda, as you mentioned, I'm really excited to join you and your audience. What is the risk? Because
Yeah.
here's the thing, we live in a very different world when it comes to DEI right now, which, again, it is what it is. Given that that's the world that we live in, there are risks when you decide to say, oh, I really value this, or I value this. So what I'll do is I will walk your audience through the way to identify how to speak up for diversity, but also how to make it inclusive. Because there is a way to talk about diversity and make it exclusive by saying
Right.
things like, oh, we value this. And then, for example, if you say, because honestly, Melinda, even us talking about this, there may be some men out there that think, oh my gosh, so what, they hate men now? Like, it's
Right.
like men bad. And it's like,
Right.
no,
Right.
it's about women empowerment, and also men being allies, right? So anyway, so those
Absolutely.
are some of the is understand your value. How does it tie to your business case or your bottom line? How can you manifest that? And then what are the risks that are associated with that, and which risks are you willing to take? Because there are a lot of risks that organizations say, I accept that because I want to show that I value diversity. So we'll walk all the way through that, and it is different with small organizations. But if you're ready, I'm really, really ready to help take you there.
I'm excited to hear what you have to say. So I'm going to wrap up and kind of just talk about a couple of the questions that I always ask at the end of the podcast is, when I think about me starting my business journey, and a lot of other women as well, when you look at where you are today, you're successful, you've been a speaker, you've made some huge accomplishments. What are some of the things that you, through that journey, that you've learned that if you could go back in time and like teach your beginning self about that, what would be something that you recognize now that would be a great feature from early beginner?
Yeah, two things right off the bat. Number one, I would have used my money differently. I would have invested a little bit more in paying for things and services, or like, so for example, building a website or having videos or things like that. Investing in things that I'm just not good at. I spent a lot of time building a website, for example, and I'm like, I have no clue what I'm doing. And there are a lot of tools online that are really good. But here's the thing. I thought that I was good at everything.
Right. That's such good advice. Right.
And that's okay. And that's okay. You should do the things that you're really good at, because that is less money and it's more efficient and it keeps you happy. Sometimes you do have to invest in things that you're just not good at and you just don't want to do, because that actually accelerates your business. I wish I would have done that sooner. Number one. And the second thing, Malinda, honestly, I would have gone into consulting sooner. I think I relied very heavily on corporations, companies, established brands to build me. Oh, look, I'm the vice president of. Oh, look, I'm the officer of.
Yes.
But you know what happened? They owned me. I had to wear their colors. I had to say what they wanted me to say, and again, I don't regret it because I learned a lot.
Right.
But if I could have gone back, I would have told myself, you're ready. You're ready to do this for you.
That's the imposter syndrome kicking in. Way too early.
You don't have to attach yourself to another brand. You are the brand. I would have done this sooner, Malinda, honestly.
I can totally appreciate that. I mean, I've been saying for the whole time I've been in corporate sales, like, I'm so tired of selling for these big companies. Like, I want to sell my own thing so that the money is mine and the values are mine and the voice is mine and I get to do it my way. But when you're in the corporate thing, you just kind of plug through until and sometimes, like, I don't know when the right time is going to be for me, but I'm grateful that you've looked back and realized, like, this is what you're meant to be doing, because it's very obvious to me that this is what you should be doing. And if you could wave a magic wand for women in business, and that would, give them one little thing to elevate their success, what do you think that would be for you?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is just easier access to funding, and kind of access to funding that makes sense and is a little bit more sustainable. I think that it's just hard to get investors, loans, this kind of thing, even for me. And I find that I have a lot of good resources around me to coach me around money, to coach me around that. But women weren't really taught about money. We weren't really taught about how to manage it, how to work with it, how to leverage it, how to manipulate it, where to get it, and then how to drive it forward. We just weren't. So, I mean, your friend, Dr. Barb Provost, she told me that every day there's something like 800 or 1,800, it's an insane amount of businesses that are opened by women every day.
Oh my gosh.
And that's huge. If I could wave a magic wand, because I think women really have some amazing ideas. What often stops us, though, is not just the imposter syndrome. Sometimes money does make the world go round. If you don't have it, then a lot of times you do have to stop. I mean, even for me, Malinda, I've got a certain runway to make this happen, like financial runway to make this happen.
Yeah,
it would be amazing if we just had easier ways to like access funding, whether it's investments, angel investing, whatever, to help kind of drive things, accelerated. So that's what I would wish for women who are,
oh my gosh,
really
that would,
entrepreneurship.
I agree. That is a big one. We could all use more of that, right? Yeah, exactly. So just to wrap this up, since obviously we talk about gratitude here a lot at Grateful Connections, what would you say you're most grateful for in your business journey, and then maybe even in your personal life?
Yeah. In my business journey, I'm very, very grateful for those mentors. And actually formal and informal mentors. Formal mentors who, like you and I have known, who have taken you aside and kind of consistently said, don't do this, do this cheerleader, piece. The informal mentors, like the ones that you and I talked about today, that have said, wow, you were really amazing. Here's one thing I would say to you. Or, wow, that was, even people to say, like, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. That kind of informal and formal mentorship, I am so grateful for, because no matter how successful we get, imposter syndrome is very real. The imposter phenomenon is very real. And actually, for people who are accomplished, the imposter phenomenon is actually more real for them.
Interesting.
That's just what the research shows. So to have that type of informal and formal mentorship is really critical. And I'm grateful for that. On the flip end, personally, Malinda, you know that I'm a mom just like you. I am a single mom. I have 4 boys. I have 2 sets of twins. I have 17-year-old boys and 12-year-old boys. And, here's their video,
their artwork. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you can see, so then I've got my little corner, but what's cool is they are so proud of me, and what I love is how engaged they are. My 2 older ones, they have accounts, and they're like, Mom, we follow you. And I tell my friends to follow you, and like just that kind of stuff. And I hear them say stuff to their friends about how, well, Mom does this and Mom has this. That type of mentorship and support, I don't teach them that. I didn't say like, well, but to have that type of support from your children,
that is beautiful,
invaluable.
It is,
because it gives you, the ability to do this, because mom guilt is also very real.
Huge.
So
yes,
to be like, hey guys, I got to do this, and they're like, okay,
we support you.
Green.
Yeah. That is beautiful. And I have to say the same thing. That is one of the things I always love, is when my daughter's like, when she'll say, I'm so proud of you, Mom. Or she'll say, I'm so excited that I get to tell my friends that my mom does this. I'm like, I mean, really and truly, right? That to know that your kids look up to you and actually see the movement that we're making and the progress and the impact that we're making. Yeah. There's just nothing out of all the people that cheer you on. It really is the best, right?
I agree.
I love that. I love that. Well, I'm so excited. So if you want to just give us one last quick roundup, where do we find you? What are you up to? I know you've got a podcast. I know that you obviously have email and a website. So if you want to share all your fun things, I would love to share that with everyone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm not going to go through all of the handles, but we'll make sure that Malinda has it so that we can put it in the description. Anywhere that there's an online platform, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, I'm all there. And we'll make sure to list that all for you. And then and my website is Eloiza Domingo, just my name, eloizadomingo.com. And then I do have a new podcast that's out. I think we've got 5 episodes out. It's called Disrupt the Podcast, which is about how we're leaning into chaos. The world is in a lot of disruption, but how are you taking that disruption in 4 areas of your life: relationships, society, work, and play, and you're turning that into innovation and growth for you. So that's what that podcast is. So we'll get you all of those links. And please follow and interact. I'd love to hear from all of you all.
Well, I will personally say anyone who is lucky enough to come in contact with you is just like, I love the energy every time I get to be around you. And I just know that I will swallow all that up in the next week or 2 while we're gathering everything ready for the event. And I'm so grateful for you and our time together. So thank you, Eloiza. All right. Thank you so much, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, I would love for you to subscribe so you never miss a conversation. You can find me at gratefulconnections.com, join our private Facebook group, Grateful Connections, and follow me on Instagram at gratefulconnections_CO. Sharing is an act of gratitude, so please pass this along to another woman in business who inspires you.
We're so grateful you joined us on What Gratitude Built. We grow stronger when we grow together. So stay connected, stay inspired, and let gratitude lead the way in your business and your life.